Well, good afternoon, and welcome to another episode of Real Estate Talk with Lisa. I'm your host, Lisa Jeffery, and we meet here every Thursday from 2:30 to 3:30, and we talk about the things that matter to you regarding real estate, housing issues, and community development. As we always tell you, we try to open the door with keys of independence so that we can educate, empower, and motivate you to action. And as you can see, we have a beautiful, beautiful full house today. Our topic today is NAREB, and we're going to tell you just who NAREB is, and celebrating both them and the Fair Housing Act, which turns 50 years old today, and NAREB has a birthday this year as well. So I'm going to start from my far left, and you guys, I take my glasses off. Didn't get those bifocals yet. But on my far left is Mr. Bernie Jackson. He is with BJR Property Management and Realty Sales. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. And he is from the Baltimore chapter of NAREB. And NAREB stands for the National Association of Real Estate Brokers. A lot of you are familiar with hearing about NAR. We're going to tell you just how important NAREB has been to the Fair Housing Act and even today. Seated next to him is Miss Vernada Williams, and she is heads up the Prince George's County chapter of NAREB, correct? And we're just delighted to have her with us, and she's going to share as well about her particular chapter. And then, of course, you guys, if you watch the show, you know who I have beside me, Mr. Brian Washington, who's with Prime Lending. He's done several episodes with us for lending options for you, both for single-family purchase as well as multifamily. And he is also a member of the D.C. chapter of NAREB, correct?
That's correct.
All right. So just wanted to say about the organization. It was started in Tampa, Florida in 1947. You see me looking at Mr. Jackson on the end because he is an historian for the organization. So he has free reign to correct me if I if I mess up. And the reason that the organization was started is because African Americans and other minorities were not allowed membership into, I want to say it's the National Board of Realtors was the name back then. Is that correct? Is that the correct name for them?
Yes.
At that time? And we know them as NAR now. That's the name that they eventually changed to. But they were not allowed membership, but they were practicing real estate. So at that time, the first president, W.D. Morrison Jr., had the idea to start, because he, along with several other real estate salespeople, had been coming to meetings of the let me look, National Negro Business League, and in this meeting, he was thinking, we need something for our section. We need to have some advocacy. We need to be able to have high ethical standards in real estate. We need to have something that supports what our people are doing in the real estate industry. And so he started the organization with several other people there at the meeting. And what impressed me was the mindset. You would think, okay, you've been marginalized. You got a little animosity. You're probably angry, and you just that's the tone of the organization. But it wasn't, and I really like what he said. And this is from an article that he wrote, and he said that he started out. He said, "We practice democracy and believe in organized cooperative leadership in the field of real estate, locally and nationally. Our doors stand ajar to all good Americans, regardless of race, creed, or color, in associated fields of real estate for membership. This is the position we took for NAREB when we founded it 8 years ago and received membership then from the Caucasian race, because we felt then, as we do now, if we were to be equal to the task ahead and honest to ourselves and our fellow man, an integrated effort would better fit us to serve our profession." And so when you start out with a sentiment like that, the motto for the organization is democracy in housing. And I feel like when you start with that foundation at the core, it guides how how your organization is run. And they were, if yesterday was the Fair Housing Act's birthday, then I'm sitting with the midwives right here.
Okay.
Because NAREB, along with the NAACP, a couple of other organizations, were instrumental in making sure that the legislation passed. So we're going to show a clip now. It's called NAREB Fair Housing. It's going to give you a little bit of history about the organization, as well as a little bit of insight about where they're looking to go now. We have a special guest because this is the time for the Midwinter Conference for NAREB. It's being held in Memphis, and the executive director, whose office is here in Prince George's County, is at the event, and he's going to give us a call. We're going to be able to interview him and talk about what's going on in the organization now. So please enjoy the clip, and we'll see you in a few moments. It should be airing in just a moment.
In the nation believed that fair housing would in our time become the unchallenged law of this land. And indeed, this bill has had a long and stormy trip. Of the first effective federal law against discrimination in the sale and the rental of housing in the United States of America.
We've got some difficult days ahead, and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know that we as a people will get to the promised land.
NAREB was founded because African Americans could not be members of NAR, at that time. And so there were a number of local real estate, African American real estate trade associations around the country who decided to come together and form a national organization. Each time it seems that we eradicate one issue, another one, pops up. And so we continue to have to be advocates for our people and for these communities. And of course it goes beyond just advocating for our people, because generally when we are successful in knocking down many of these barriers that exist, everybody benefits from it.
While expanding home ownership through education and counseling. It is our vision at Fannie Mae to be America's most valued housing partner, and that is why we're partnering with NAREB.
NAREB defines its purpose in its Constitution, and it's one sentence, and it says, to enhance the economic improvement of its members.
With this program, positions NAREB to be the change agents in the African American community.
We have that awesome responsibility, not only to this generation, but certainly to the generations to come.
Since 1947, we were started in Tampa, Florida. Our association has been committed to increasing home ownership opportunities for Black veterans. Remember in 1947, people were coming home from World War II. We had the GI Bill, and unfortunately at that point in time, many Black people could not take advantage of the home ownership opportunities that were afforded to white Americans as it relates to the GI Bill.
We have been on this road for 70 years, and sometimes it looks like things has not changed. And sometimes I realize that things really haven't changed, but that's our purpose. And until things changed, this organization will be here.
All right, well, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed our little brief history lesson there. And so I think at the conclusion of that clip, you were able to really see the value that the organization has brought into the real estate industry and into housing. That's why their motto, democracy and housing, is so important. Before I introduce our Mr. Thompson, before he calls in, I just wanted to read a clip. This is from the Berkeley Journal of African American Law and Policy. It's Margolyn Armstrong. It's from January 1994. It's African Americans and Property Ownership, creating our own meanings, redefining our relationships. And I'm not going to read her whole article, but it was a couple of points she made that I think are pertinent for today. She said, in the United States, property law has always been a foundational, essential element in determining resource distribution and protecting or preserving distributive decisions. African American communities need to take a two-pronged approach to laws that affect property distribution to correct the existing distortions in our relationship to property. On one front, it's time for African Americans to concentrate our efforts on dismantling the barriers to equal rights and property ownership that we face in our interaction with American society as a whole. And on the second front, we must create and define our relations to property within African American communities. And she goes on to note several authors, and they have written about how the interaction concepts of race and property were used to establish and maintain the racial and economic subordination of blacks, Native Americans, and Mexican citizens. So that just lets you know that we're not talking about just a simple disagreement about whether or not you could live here or live there. It was systemic. It was part of how American society was built, and it really called for the creation of this organization. So don't feel like, okay, well, I have other affiliations now. Is that relevant? We're going to show you just how relevant this organization is. Now, our guest is going to be calling in is the executive director of the National Association of Real Estate Brokers, Mr. Antoine N. Thomspon. This is, of course, the largest, oldest African American trade organization. Okay. Now, he's the owner and founder of Next Level 21, which is his consulting firm, and it focuses on diversity, inclusion, and advocacy work. He has been a champion of fair housing for a number of years. He is a native of Buffalo, New York. That's his hometown. And his appointments have included the Buffalo Common Council, and he authored the Buffalo Fair Housing Law, and he secured over $75 million. $75 million. I'm going to say it again just in case you blinked. In community development projects. There's a wading pool, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Park, the Frank E. Merriweather Jr. Library, and the restoration of 60 Headley Place, which is a 19th century farmhouse, and it's linked to the Underground Railroad. He was elected to the New York State Senate in both 2004 and 2008, serving as the Senate Deputy Majority Whip and the chair of the Senate Standing Committee on Environmental Conversation, and he was also the co-chair of the Senate Minority and Women Business Enterprise Task Force. So, in just telling you who he is, it gives you a little insight of the caliber of the leadership within the organization. Because if you want to have good leadership, we always talk about on the show how you need knowledge to make good decisions. That's how you become empowered, because that gives you the confidence to take the appropriate steps, and it'll motivate you to action. So here we have good leadership, experienced leadership that is guiding, the organization from the executive director position. Now, because the main office is here in Prince George's County, have you guys had an opportunity to interact with Mr. Thomspon?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, we do. Quite often, he visits our chapters. He gives us advice. He comes through if there are any special events that need to be addressed or prepared for. He comes and gives us advice and direction for those.
So he's hands-on.
He's hands-on, absolutely.
And very passionate. Lots of passion, lots of energy, and intention about making this organization run very well and making sure we're all on the same page. I don't know, Mr. Jackson had anything he
Well, from my perspective, I work with him through now. our board of directors. I'm
Okay.
part of the executive board.
Ah, excellent.
And him being there with his background is just an added dimension that we
Yes.
have not had before. And we certainly are appreciative of his experience and what he's done for the area and our association.
Excellent, excellent. Because and just going through this, it's just impressive in terms of there's so much that goes on that we're not aware of, and even as a realtor, and I was prepping for the show because you don't have just a show and just have people on. You don't know why you have them on. So you're doing your study, your prep, and I was just so impressed by the achievements of the organization. So I'm really just glad to have you here. Now he's going to be calling us from the NAREB Midwinter Regional Conference. Now this is different from the 71st anniversary. It's going to be taking place a little later this year, correct?
Correct. July 27th to the 29th.
All right now. So we be lighting a big old birthday cake.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's
Oh, I believe this is our call. Let me see.
BGR, this is Shantae. How can I help you?
Oops. Nope.
That's
Oh, that was him.
Yep.
For the radio program?
Yes, sir. I have it. Good morning. Oh, well, good afternoon, Mr. Thompson. How are you?
I'm doing great. And yourself?
I'm doing wonderful. This is Lisa, and I'm sitting here with some of your great leadership here for the organization. I have Mr. Bernie Jackson here with the Baltimore chapter. I have Miss Vernada Williams with the Prince George's County chapter, and of course our sponsor and great friend, Mr. Brian Washington with the DC chapter. So we're all here, and so glad to have you participate with us today.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be a part of this.
Yes, prior to you coming on, we did air the clip for the audience, showing NAREB Fair Housing. That particular clip to give them some background about the organization. Some may ask the question: is the organization still relevant today? What would you say to that?
I would say 1,000,000% that is still relevant.
Yes.
Given that the discrimination in America is alive and well, that the things that help create NAREB, the issues of access to housing, access to credit, combating discrimination, and giving people a choice, or meaningful choice of where they live and who they decide to live with. Those issues are just as important today as they were 71 years ago.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Now, you guys, you're at the NAREB Midwinter Regional Conference. Can you tell us a little bit about the conference?
Yes. I'm really excited. Today we have leaders from over 25 states that are here in Memphis, Tennessee, planning, organizing issues related to how they can carry the NAREB message of creating 2 million new African American homeowners across the country, learning how they can be stronger leaders, not just professionally, but from a civic perspective. And we will have a presentation on a video that just is coming out tomorrow on NAREB's role in the passage of the Fair Housing Act of 1968 on the 50th anniversary of that signing was yesterday.
Yeah.
So we have a very hearty agenda. We're preparing for Realtors Week, which kicks off on Sunday across the country. So we're meeting with some of our leaders across the country to get them ready for that. And then we have a countdown to Homeownership Month in June, and then our 71st annual convention, which will have a tremendous focus on fair housing in the unfinished business in that area, which will take place in Atlanta, Georgia, from July 25th to the 28th. So we're very, very busy.
Yes, you are, and very robust.
A lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do, and we'll be on Capitol Hill at the White House trying to in May, emphasizing unfinished business around fair housing and increasing Black homeownership as well.
Excellent. Yes, because now the theme of building Black wealth through home ownership, I saw that at the base of the agenda, and I just wanted to share with the audience some of the topics. So there's building wealth with Black wealth with millennial homeowners, building wealth through social media, real estate development, through government channels, through commercial brokerage. So it seems that you guys are looking to cover every facet of the real estate industry and the housing industry to make sure that your motto of democracy and housing is in full force. Is that correct?
Yes, there are. We have covered a lot of areas. There's still some other areas that we need to cover, and we'll try to cover even more of those. Advocacy, workforce and inclusion in the mortgage industry. There's some other aspects that we'll look at covering our annual convention. But yes, at our conference here, we are covering a number of important topics that will help us create 2 million new homeowners over the next 5 years.
Excellent. And when I was reviewing the webpage, I find that the organization annually publishes the study of housing in Black America. The acronym is SHEBA, and it gives us statistical evidence of what's going on, and I think some points for moving forward. And I think that production of that report is very helpful for those that are looking to get additional information for that. Are you seeing Black homeownership increase at all for over last year?
So it has been seesawing back and forth. The U.S. Census puts out homeownership estimates every quarter. So it's been a roller coaster, moving up 1% or 2%, the back and forth each the last 2 quarters. So it has gone up the last year, but not much. And so that's part of our effort to see those numbers go in a different direction. Because believe it or not, the Fair Housing Act of 1968, one of the things it sought to do was to remove many of the racial barriers to having access to housing. And 50 years later, the homeownership rate for African Americans is approximately the same that it was in 1968. We have to put it in the context of, yes, we passed the Fair Housing Bill in 1968, but it would not be until the Community Reinvestment Act that made financial institutions loan money, and then it would not. The Fair Housing Act got some more teeth in 1987 with amendments to the Fair Housing Act, and then a couple of years later, there were some additional amendments. So yes, we passed it in 1968. Yes, there was some progress in terms of overt discrimination, but it would not be until the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act in the mid-1970s, which makes banks report to the federal government their lending patterns, the Community Reinvestment Act in the 1970s that made banks evaluate as well based on their lending patterns, and then the Fair Housing Act got some teeth in the 1980s, and then the unfortunate part is that we made a lot of gains in home ownership until around 2007, and then with the mortgage crisis, which has happened every 30 or 40 years or so, there's some type of savings and loans crisis. The one that we lived through in the 2000s, the one during the Great Depression that created FHA. So there's been these cyclical things, and we have to just make sure that African Americans have access to affordable and sustainable home ownership opportunities, because home ownership is the #1 way that wealth is generated. And right now, There's a 42% homeownership rate for African Americans, and there's a 72% homeownership rate for white Americans. We must close that gap, and that's what NAREB is trying to do.
Yes, that's not just a gap. That's like a canyon, in terms of disparity. So it would behoove all of us to participate with the efforts of NAREB, but also to keep, I think, an eye on our local politicians and the legislature that's being passed, because I know, just in reading and as a realtor myself, the concerns over what's going on with HUD and how that's going to affect home ownership, and the lack of enthusiasm, if you will, to enact some of the Obama era changes and stipulations for HUD to more vigorously pursue and collect certain data. Is NAREB pretty much a central place that even your average average American can go to the website to get information how to be an effective advocate in their community?
Yeah, I want to say one point that I did not adequately respond to is every year the association, we put out a State of Housing in Black America report. It's all about data, and that's essential because you can talk with a financial institution and they can talk about all the great things that they're doing. They're giving money to Little League sports teams. They're giving the churches and some of the community organizations funds. But when we show them the lending patterns based on what they had to report to the federal government, and it shows by zip code, it shows by a legislative district, whether it's state, whether it's federal, whether it's a city, a municipality. We can drill down to the census tract. So that's important when you're having conversations about how do we grow home ownership, because it separates the reality from the rhetoric. It makes the rubber meet the road, and NAREB works with its local officials and local leaders to educate them about these vast disparities, because many people don't know the rate of denials for loans for African Americans in various cities. In many cities across the country, the data that's reported to the federal government by lender institutions shows that too often black applicants for mortgage loans are denied anywhere from 1.5 up to 3 times the amount or rate that a white person applies for a loan. Most African Americans or white Americans or others are not aware of that. It's our job as advocates to constantly educate people with the statistics that the federal government receives from these institutions and figure out how they can make change. Because what we find is that when you put the numbers on the table, most people are blown. Yesterday we were with the mayor of D.C., Mayor Bowser, mayor of Washington, D.C., and we showed her that just in one category of loans, there were 25,000 loans in the city of Washington, D.C. In 2016. That 25,000, 15,000 went to white Americans, 8,000 went to African Americans. African Americans got, we got like 25%, white Americans got 53%. That's totally unacceptable.
That's right. And
this is what this fight is about. You can't, if you want to start a business, you got to have collateral. If you need money to send your kids to college, you can use that with your equity in your house and things like that. So we fight. Our fight is about making people aware about these vast disparities and helping them to develop solutions to these challenges.
Excellent. And that you brought out such a tremendous point in terms of the lack of information. The word fake news is used so freely, now, lately, usually by the purveyors of the same fake news. But sometimes you'll have conversations with people about the disparities, and they take it from an emotional standpoint. But when you're able to show them the actual data and sit down with them and say, hey, look, it's not just my opinion. Here are the facts. Here are the numbers themselves. It makes it, I think, more valid. It presents them with a true picture of reality as opposed to that bubble that they may be operating in. Mr. Thompson, go ahead. You can follow up with that.
Yeah, I wanted to say I was at a luncheon, a meeting yesterday morning that was convened by a bunch of groups at the National Community Reinvestment Coalition. They had their conference, annual conference yesterday in D.C. And I was the only association leader with a bunch of bankers at the table in community lending, and they were debating me and all this about things were not that bad, and people just need to apply and all that rhetoric, and we got this product, we got that product. They even went on to say that more people are using convention loans versus FHA. And I let them talk, and I said we publish a report every year, and African Americans don't get those, are not getting as many conventional loans as they did before 2008. And secondly, FHA loans are we are disproportionately in FHA. These are the numbers. And then I went on after they kept giving me this song. I said, where's your bank from? Where's your primary market? And then when I touched them and they told me that, and I started quoting the numbers from the area, they all said, "Oh, you know what? You might be right."
Yes, bringing that truth to light, and that's a needed effort there. I want to thank you so much for calling into us, and this won't be the last time that our show focuses on the organization's efforts. As you guys are heading into your 71st anniversary celebration, we look to connect with you again to talk about the festivities and what's going on there. Enjoy the rest of the conference, and thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you for having me, and hello to all your dynamic, beautiful and handsome guests you have on
here. Yes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
All righty. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right. So that pretty much, as you said, put the rubber to the road there in terms of what you see is that people aren't aware, of what's going on, and it makes them very easily swayed to somebody's rhetoric, to somebody's conversation, to their own bias, because they don't have the facts.
Right.
So I'm going to start over with you, Mr. Burnett.
Thank you. I guess he also didn't point out that during his sessions yesterday, he also attended the Fair Housing 50th anniversary with her, which I was also with him yesterday. Okay. So yesterday he must have had at least 3 to 4 conferences that he had to attend prior to now being in Memphis today.
So he is dedicated.
He's truly an active executive director.
But I liked what he said, because he was like, I was at the table, I was listening, I let them talk first, basically, and then I pulled out my facts, and they had to back down, and that's the thing, when you have the facts, you can make them back down, you can make people reconsider because you have the truth. And the report itself, it takes work. It doesn't just materialize. So the dedication to, because I've seen several of the reports, year after year. So the dedication to create that so that you have a record of what's happening and what's not happening, when you match that with what people are saying, it makes you hold people accountable for the things that they're telling you. So what would you like to share with us on the
let me also say, in addition to where he's today, 2 weeks ago, we also had we had to hold 2 midwinters.
Okay.
The one 2 weeks ago was in Las Vegas, and that was around, I think we had 40 boards in attendance at that session. Just giving some of the facts of where we are today, and just to reiterate what you have said about just a little bit of our history.
Yes, sir.
Without doubt, we started in 1947 in Tampa, July 29th. Basic reason we started because we were not allowed membership in the National Association of Real Estate Boards, who later changed their name to what it is today, the National Association of Realtors.
Yes.
Now, given that as well, throughout the years, we've had challenges and we've had battles. But this week and this time is just so special because we are at the 50th anniversary of fair housing, and we're, of course, looking at something that came about during that 50th anniversary. A lot of our historians today will take to their grave, if it weren't for one material fact, there would not be a 50th anniversary of fair housing. And what's that fact? That is the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King.
That's right.
Let me assure you, that fair housing bill was introduced in Congress in somewhere around 1963. It lingered in Congress. It lingered. It would not come out of session because there were certain trade associations that said that legislation would not benefit our members and the minority community that they served.
Right.
And that large trade association was the National Association of Realtors. Given that fact, we had to testify before Congress in 1965, 1966, 1967 to push forth the fundamental rights of this bill. And even though our testimony, the bill was still watered down. We know the basic rights that the Fair Housing Bill gave us, but it gave us the Fair Housing Bill, but there was no teeth to it. There was no penalties. There was no reprimands. But years later, that was put forth, and of course, we know that the bill has some amendments in 1988, and that was the inclusion of familial status and the Disability Act. Given that today, we are not celebrating, we are just commemorating the 50th anniversary. And we have worked so hard to introduce new legislation that will hopefully just to put a little more teeth into this as we go forward with more and different innovative approaches to home ownership. As Mr. Thomspon also said, in 1968, we had a home ownership rate of 41.7%. It went up as high as 47%. And then we saw, of course, the wavering that we had in 2008, when we had lending practices, we had bad advice from lenders, we had bad advice from agents,
Some agents.
and appraisers,
That's
and
right.
it just caused our membership and our constituents to lose so much equity in their property. And again,
right.
you're saying that today we're back actually to where we started, with also a rate of around 41.7%. So with that, a couple years ago, we introduced that we had to do something drastic, and we're putting in that we're trying to achieve 5 million new homeowners, 2 million new homeowners in 5 years. With that, we are now putting a great effort in working with the community-based association, which we have now put a lot of emphasis on and a lot of partnerships. So from that, and with the future that we're going, we think that we will be on mark, but Congress also has to do its part, HUD has to do its part, and of course, our own minority bonds have to do their part.
That's right. That's right.
Because we've found that new term that we have, millenniums, we don't want to lose touch with them.
That's right.
Because millenniums don't know anything about fair housing.
That's right. That's right.
And they have to be taught. So it is just so gratifying that now is the time that we can go back and teach the millenniums what fair housing is about, when it came about, and why. So we do have a great opportunity this year to put all those things in place.
That's right. And also encouraging hesitant buyers that are, weighing, should I keep renting or should I buy, to get them to understand, just as Mr. Thomspon was mentioning, that ownership piece, that equity that you can develop in your property can then leverage you other opportunities. It's the cornerstone for being able to do other things.
Right.
And without that piece, you are more so at the mercy of your environment, financially, mentally, and it makes a stronger community when you have home ownership versus just transient living in the community, because then you have more at stake. So, one thing I wanted to say to everyone, Prime Lending is our sponsor of this event. Now Brian is here for Prime Lending, but he is also here as part of the DC NAREB chapter, and I wanted to make sure that I acknowledged that. And he has gone through great efforts to bring this together for us and to work with us to help get this piece produced. He reached out to Mr. Thompson on behalf of the show and just done an outstanding job. So I just want to acknowledge that. I want people to know, because I grew up, they say you give honor where honor is due. So I just wanted to make sure that I acknowledge that.
Oh, my pleasure.
Now, can you two build on what Mr. Bernie has shared with us?
Absolutely, and I want to say, Lisa, thank you so much for inviting me and having me here today.
Yes,
I am one of the charter members of the United Realtists of Prince George's County. Our chapter president is Jerome Pugh, and I came to represent our chapter today.
All right.
Mr. Thompson, Antoine gave us a great background and great information about the purpose and plans for the NAREB organization. Bernie has given us great information and history and built upon that. I wanted to say a couple of things. One of the things that Bernie brought out was equity, which equity is a great wealth builder. One of the things that I've observed is the equity since the loss of equity since the event in 2007, 2008. Of course, our communities seem to be impacted even greater than some of the other communities in the area. And even though some of the similar impact on other communities in Virginia, neighboring Virginia, Maryland, and even Washington, D.C., they have regained their equity and even surpassed where they were prior to that event. However, in lots of communities in Prince George's County, we're still struggling to come back up to level off the playing field, not to even exceed where we were before.
That's right.
And that's an issue that needs to be addressed. A lot of times I'm noticing that it comes from appraisals. Appraisal amounts are not being, the values are not being handed out what I would say is fairly. And that's an issue that may be addressed through HUD, because a lot of times those appraisals are those HUD approved appraisers, and so they have a mandate from their employer, their licensor, the people who give them license, to make sure numbers look a certain way.
Right.
And then that is another way that we are losing wealth in our communities, because if we're not building the equity, then we're not building the wealth, and so we're staying stagnant. I've also heard that the Mortgage Brokers Association had been planning to build to focus on other communities of color, not just the majority community, but other communities, minorities other than African Americans as homeowners, because they feel that other communities will be the homeowners of the future and not the African Americans. So we need to change the mindset.
That's right.
To make them aware that we do matter. Black lives do matter. Black home ownership matters.
That's right.
NAREB has the emphasis on 2 million homeowners in 5 years. We need to get everybody on board with that.
That's right.
We need to get realtors who are not members of Realtis, the National Association of Real Estate Brokers, on board, just because there's such a great benefit to know where we came from, whose shoulders we stand on.
That's right.
As Realtis and as Realtors, and to take advantage of that and honor what they've done to get us to where we are today.
That's right.
25 years ago, really, we didn't have the number of African American realtors that we have now. And people in the past fought to get us here. And so we need to acknowledge that and carry forth the work that they've done.
And that's, you bring up a good point, because, when you come to the point where you have integration and inclusion, there is sometimes a tendency to leave the old for the new. And I think a better paradigm would be a synthesis of the old and the new, because you need both. It's great that we can be parts of other organizations, and no disparagement there, but you also have to look at your foundation and what made that possible, and look at the work that still needs to be done. It's like, okay, I have cake, but Joan and Bill and Dave, they don't have cake. So maybe I need to be involved in a way so we can all have cake. We can have a party, because one person eating cake is just somebody having dessert, but a lot of people having cake, that's a party. And I think looking at creating that mindset again, because we had that mindset, but we've kind of lost it through a number of different factors, and I won't go into all of those now, but we've kind of lost that kind of community-minded mindset. But I don't think that we can continue to look for someone to come and rescue our community. Superman is not coming, because we're the kryptonite. So he's not coming. He done hung up his cape. He's over there. So, but I believe that with dynamic leadership here from this organizations, other community-based organizations, that we contain the knowledge and the wherewithal to make those changes. And a partnership, though, with the organizations that are focused on that is a key thing.
Yep.
Brian, what you got for us?
Wow, this is a lot. So again, thanks for having us.
Yes.
I was really excited when you provided the opportunity, and with the commemoration of the 50th year for the Fair Housing Act. This organization, I came into the organization back in really 2002 when I moved from Atlanta, Georgia, up here. I was in Atlanta, Georgia, where there's a huge contingent of NAREB members there, the Empire Board, and one of the members said, since you're going back up north, you have to find a local chapter of NAREB.
Stay active.
Yeah, well, I wasn't even a part then.
Okay.
I wasn't. That's how I came in. Involved. He said you absolutely have to find a chapter in D.C. They got a great group of people up there, and I think you'll find that beneficial. So it's great from the networking standpoint. That of course, because even for agents. So if you're an agent out here, I would strongly recommend you join a local chapter, because it really helps when you're making an offer and you're bidding. It's easy to pick up the phone call and call Vernada or call Bernie because you've seen them at an event. You're on the same team, because I like to look at NAREB as a team.
Yes.
And of people who are looking to go in this right direction, same direction, and I think right now increasing Black home ownership and making sure, really, quite frankly, as we increase Black home ownership, it benefits the wider community, everyone out here. Right. Because we didn't really touch on this, but really home ownership creates, like you touched on it, stability in the home. And that's another reason it's important. Yes, it's absolutely important for the equity, for building net worth, starting your business, funding college. Those are definitely ways. But also just test scores in general for children
you are so
increase when they have home,
yes.
A place they call home. So we want to continuously increase that. And the other question I like to answer that wasn't asked of me, but if you don't mind, why NAREB now? The way I see it, NAREB is a team. Okay, we're it's clear that we have this mission. We all need to work together now. So when we have these meetings with the mayors of the world, we're not just 10 of us showing up. We've got 10 in the room, and we've got 30 outside in the lobby because we couldn't get in.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
Because politicians understand numbers, just like we in the banking industry, in the finance industry, and real estate industry. We all understand numbers around this table. Okay. And guess what? Politicians do. So we need your support. So find your local chapter and please join today. Okay. If you're not going to join today, we'll give you till next week.
That's right.
All right. And that's fine.
Realtors Week.
Realtors Week, because
Absolutely.
we all have all sorts of activities through the week. We all have meetings with politicians, our local politicians, coming next week. We have our for the DC chapter, for example, we have the community wealth building through home ownership workshop. That's going to be at the Banneker Center in Washington D.C., right across the street from Howard University, another landmark for our community. That's right. That's going to be from 11 to 2. You can go out to our website or go to our Facebook page, rather, DC REBA, WREBA. okay, and where I'm actually representing Daniel Mushala, who's the president.
Yes.
I meant to mention that. So,
Okay. And I actually have I have a flyer of that particular event posted on my website. And Renata, we'll have yours up.
Yes.
And if you have an event too, Bernie, we'll have yours up. But share with you about your event. Renata.
Our event is going to be on April the 21st. It's going to be at the Prince George's Sports and Learning Complex, starting at 10 a.m. And we're going to be there from 10 to 3. And we'll have a number of workshops for the community, an investors forum, a short sale forum. A lot of community members have heard about short sales, but not really sure what it is, what it does, and how it impacts them. So we'll have that. We'll have a fair housing focus. We have several other workshops for the community, and we're actually also going to have a session for realtors who may want to be interested in becoming realtist.
Okay, I should be at that session.
Yes, yes. So it's going to be a great event. Again, it's at the Prince George's Sports and Learning Complex next Saturday, April 21st, from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. And we'd love for people to come out and join us there.
Excellent, excellent. Yes, sir.
Well, I'm just going to have my president get in touch with you. If you can have this section that's Thursday, then maybe you can invite her to just to call in and give you outline what we're planning next week.
Okay, that'd be outstanding. I'd love to
Great
do that. I'd love to do that. And if you guys watch, look at our Facebook page. It's Real Estate Talk with Lisa. Please like and share. Right now, you're watching us on the WBGR Wellness Network. But if you go to our page, you see that I posted our initial announcement, and you'll find the video clip again, as well as several others from the NAREB site. There are links to Mr. Thompson. There are links to Prime Lending. And when I get with my guests, we'll get the additional information to link you to their chapter pages or their chapter websites, so that you will have access to all of what they have. We also will put the show up on YouTube later this evening after we air. We'll have that up. So if you have friends that they may not be Facebook aficionados, especially after all of the information. I'm biased. I'm just here, but if they're not, a lot of people aren't Facebook fans per se, but they're online. So you can go to YouTube, and it's still Real Estate Talk with Lisa. You'll find this show, find other shows, because the focus on the show is to make sure that you know what's going on. And we've talked about budgeting. We've talked about understanding your debt-to-income ratio. With Brian, we've talked about how, as an individual, you can be a homeowner. You can buy a 2 to 4 unit building just as a residential purchase, and how the lender looks at that. We talked about how to manage your property. Today, we've shared with you historic information so that you know how we have what we have. And based on your age, your familial status, you may not be an African American, but you're still benefiting from the Fair Housing Act. And this is one of the groups that help make sure that you were there. That's why when they look back, when NAR looks back, when other organizations look back, when you look at the historic data, you're going to always see them linked with that. So you have to recognize who got you where you are and the value that they still bring to the community. So if they've mentioned the events, make sure you can make it out to maybe one of them. Maybe can't do them all, but reach out to them. If by chance you can't make the event, we'll put out their information. So based on your locale or where you operate, reach out to them and see how you can be a part. There's also a place on the NAREB website where you can get a subscription, where you can receive updates and newsletters and things that they're doing in your community. Because when you have access to the numbers, to the data they've collected, you can go and talk to your own elected representatives. You can be aware of what a focus may need to be. So when you're at that town meeting and they're coming to your neighborhood wanting your vote, you have issues that you can bring to them and say, hey, I saw this show and it was talking about some disparities in housing, and I looked it up and those numbers were right. What are you doing about that? Or what's your take on that? Because sometimes it doesn't even come up in the campaign conversation. You know, it's all about the current hot button issue, but sometimes if we take care of home first, all of the other issues can be more easily resolved. And you know, you mentioned about home stability and how it ties to education outcomes. One of the guests that we had on previously, the wonderful Robin McKinney, she's a mother of 7, and she'd been on Section 8 for a number of years. She'd been homeless. She's also raising a grandchild, moved into her home in December. And she had posted not too long after she had moved, one of her son's teachers had asked her, said, "So what you been doing? This grade's really coming up. They're really looking great. You know, what's going on?" And she said, "Well, we got a home."
That's right.
And it was actually measurably impactful. And you know, I've shared with my audience before that we've been homeless. You know, my daughter and I, and we've been in that type of situation. And you know, being on a precarious type thing when you're not sure, and even from a rental standpoint, when you don't know when that rent's going to go up, because it's profitable to raise it now.
Or landlord.
Yes, you know, it's challenging. So when you have, as Robin always says, you know, having the keys to the city, and she was able to tell her children, you know, we're somewhere where nobody's going to come in and change the locks again. We're here. So, you know, building black wealth through home ownership and democracy in housing. I want to thank each of you so much for coming and sharing your message with the audience, and continually educating me about where I come from. This is my family-owned property in Tennessee before I came to this area, and understanding with more clarity what it took for them to have acquired that, and some of the obstacles that they may have encountered. Any last words before we sign off?
One thing I'll just say, from a compliance standpoint,
yes.
This is Brian Washington, NMLS number 658931.
Yes.
Finish that up.
That's all right. That's all right. Anything from you, Vernada?
Yes, I'd like to say I'm Vernada Williams with Exit First Realty. You have to give a plug for where I am.
Yes.
My telephone number, may I do
yes.
that?
Yes,
It's 301-440-7450. If you have any questions regarding housing, housing-related issues, friends, family members, I'd love to have an opportunity to serve you or answer any questions you may have. I'm licensed in Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia, so we can serve you wherever you are in the greater Washington metropolitan area. Looking forward to hearing from you.
Current administration at HUD, of course, is Republican, but I was pointed out, whether you're Democrat or Republican, they all have the same mandate, and that is to help the underserved achieve home ownership. So we have to keep this administration accountable for its final actions. And that's what we're doing. Legislation and what we're doing in May to come to Washington is going to be very important. Dr. Carson, with the right direction, will benefit the minority community.
Yes. So, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I'll have everybody's information posted on our Facebook page for the show, so you can reach out to them. We're going to continue our mission as a show to continue to educate, empower, and motivate you to action. Love for you to leave a comment. And you know, if you have other questions after the show, we'll make sure that they get the information. And I'll tell you, we're probably going to continue this topic next week because it's a broad topic, and as you know, I've been digging. There's more information that I like to explore. So you haven't heard the last of this. And remember, next week we'll see you at the show. Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. This was fun.
Thank you for tuning in to WBGR World Network.